This is my old Workbench and Outfeed table. It got the job done, but it's time for an upgrade. I'd like to utilize the space underneath for storage and dust collection. I'll start off measuring the height of the legs. Then I'll set up a stop block for repeated cuts. Adjusting my stop block, I'm going to cut smaller pieces so I can laminate them to the full-size legs for half laps. I'll add some wood glue to my first piece. I like to use this little glue brush to spread the glue around. I like to make sure it's flush, and then to hold it in place, I'm going to add a few finishing nails. Then I'm going to add a spacer that's the same size as my bottom rail. This is going to be my bottom half lap. Then I'm going to add some glue to a longer piece. I'm going to use my brush and brush the glue on real good. Make sure I'm covering every part of the board so it'll laminate to the full size board a lot better. Then I'll add it, and then with another spacer I'm going to check, make sure everything is flush, and then just to hold it in place for the glue up, I'm going to add a couple more finishing nails. I like to add a board to the back and to the front. That way when I clamp it down, I don't leave marks on my project. And when I glue up like this, I like to let it sit overnight just so I know that it's for sure dry. I let this sit for 24 hours before I took the clamps off, just so I knew that it was good and dry. To square my sides up, I ran it down the table saw with the level on one side. That way I knew it was nice and flat. Then I'll flip it over and I'll run the other side down the table saw. This will get my legs cut down to size, and it will also square up the edge. And here I'll be cutting my rails down. I like to add one on top of the other and cut them both at the same time so they're the exact same size. They're a little too long for my stop block. And to attach the rails to the legs, I'm just going to use a bunch of glue, and then I'll just clamp them down. The glue would be plenty strong enough to hold this, but I just went ahead and added some screws for extra support. And I'll repeat the same steps for the other side of the frame. And this is what each side of your frame will look like. We're going to add a third leg support later on. I added a 2x4 to the back of my doweling jig, and then I clamped it to the frame. This way I'll have an 1.5 inch offset when I glue on my frame rail. And if you haven't guessed it by now, we're going to use wood glue and dowels to hold this frame together. And being very careful, I'll make the holes a little deeper for longer dowels. Then back at the miter saw, I'm going to cut out the 4 side frame rails. And now I can use my doweling jig correctly. I'm just going to clamp it to the side rail, and I'm going to drill out the holes for the dowels to put in the side rail. And now for the fun part, we're going to glue in our dowels to the frame rails. I'll add some glue and then I'll just hammer them in with this mallet. And I did get a little glue happy and a bunch leaked out, but oh well, better too much than not enough. I added a clamp to get it started, but I didn't want to get it tightened down, so then it's easier to add the top rail. I did make a huge mess with all this glue, but after I got all the glue on, I added the top rail in and I clamped the top down, but not tight, and then I'll go to the bottom and I'll tighten it down, and then I'll go back to the top and then I'll tighten it down, and then I'll go to the other side and repeat the same steps, and then I'll go back through all 4 clamps and tighten them all down. After letting it sit all night and fully drying, now I'm going to add my 3rd leg support. I'm just going to add glue and brush it on. I did measure and mark halfway of the frame, and then I measured and marked halfway on my leg, and then I'll clamp it down on that mark, so then I know it's perfectly in the middle. And then I did the same exact thing on the opposite side. Glue, brush, measure, mark, clamp it on. I did also remeasure just so I knew that it was exactly square. Now I'll cut some slats to go across the frame just for extra bracing for the top. And also I'm going to add storage and dust collection on the bottom. So I want it to be nice and strong and be able to hold all the weight. We're not going to use any fancy joinery to add these cross slats. We're just going to use pocket holes and wood glue. I like to brush the wood glue on just so I know that it's spread evenly across the board. And then I'll put it in there, and I've made a mark so I know it's perfectly in the middle, and I'll use my little fist hammer and I'll put a level on to make sure it's perfectly flat, and so it don't move when I'm trying to put the Craig pocket hole screws in. I'll put a clamp down to hold everything in place. And then I'll repeat those same steps: measure, glue, hammer fist, clamp, screw, repeat, 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 until I get all my slats in. And believe it or not, I'll actually repeat the exact same steps for the bottom. I did add a few more supports in the middle, and that will be for half storage and the other half will be for dust collection. And since my shop floor is not level at all, I'm going to add feet levelers. I'm just going to drill a 1/2 inch hole in each leg, and then I'll screw down the feet levelers. And with these levelers, I'll also be able to adjust my table so it's just slightly shorter than my table saw. And using this PL Max Premium by Loctite, I'm going to add a second layer of particle wood, and it has melamine on both sides. So I can't use wood glue because wood glue won't stick to the melamine. Now I'm going to cut some dowels so I can plug up them screws that I put into the frame earlier. I'm just going to add a little wood glue, and then I just hammer them in. And using my automatic Japanese pool saw, also known as an oscillating multi-tool, I like to cut the dowels flat after the glue is fully dry. And now for the most exciting part of all. I'm going to sand this whole thing down. I'm going to start out with 60 grit, and then I'm going to do 80 grit, and then I go with 120 to finish it. And after sanding the dowels flush, you can never even tell there's even screws in there. And using this flat black paint by Rust-Oleum, I'm going to spray the edges just to give it a nicer look. Since it has the melamine top, if you get any overspray, you can just wipe it off while the paint's still wet. And to secure the top of my table to the frame, I'm going to use these Spax 4 3/4 inch number 14 screws. First, I'm going to measure to make sure the tabletop is perfectly even on top of the frame. Then to hold it in place, I'm going to clamp it down. And then I'm going to screw it in from the bottom. And since it's just particle wood, I'm not too worried about the wood movement. And to make this a little more durable, I did decide to add 1x2 pine on the edges, and it helps trim it out, makes it look a lot nicer. I'm just going to use wood glue and finishing nails to attach it. And you can miter all your corners, but I just left mine long, and I'm just going to flush trim them. I like to put some masking tape down so I don't leave saw marks on my workpiece. Then I'll just use the Japanese pull saw and I'll flush trim. Then I'll sand it and it'll make it look nice and everything will be perfectly flush. Building this was actually pretty cheap since it was made out of pine. I think I spent like $300 on everything so far. And if you wanted it like this, you could just put a bottom on and you wouldn't have to do dust collection or storage. But I'm going to do another video and I'm going to add dust collection on one side and storage with drawers on the other side. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment if you liked it or if you didn't. Thank you very much.